I love the inflation. You know why? Because as soon as this war is over, I can say it now. Something you didn't know. Do you know we've been taking out millions of barrels of oil? I think they're going to want to make a deal, but we're going to find out.
Inflation to come down between now
Oh,
and
when the war is over?
Yes.
It's coming down.
I know you can't.
It's going to come down like a rock.
Trump may love inflation, as he said, but some Republican senators are concerned about the fallout.
I hope today's numbers will be a wake-up call because those prices are too high. We need some relief, and Congress can deliver some relief. And if Congress doesn't deliver the relief, I think voters are not going to be pleased.
Well, everybody's having some problems. We do have to get it under control.
I think people are really feeling it. I mean, it's not just gas prices, food prices, and other things. And I think there's a level of frustration.
I don't think people have a great deal of confidence in any of us right now.
Lots to talk about here. Joining me now is co-founder of Punchbowl News, John Bresnahan, and Axios senior contributor, Margaret Talev. Good to see you both. Margaret, I want to start with you. Look, the White House is explaining the president's "I love the inflation" comment. If you listen, he was sort of trailing off. It seemed like he was going to say it will come down at some point, but he never really got there. But at the same time, we are hearing Republican senators openly warn that voters are against it and are obviously against inflation. Where does the GOP go with this? How do they reconcile sort of those two dynamics?
This is like the tail that's going to wag the dog all the way until November, Omar. And the old saying, it's the economy stupid, so it's inflation stupid right now. And the challenge, I think, for the president, for Republicans, and for any incumbent is that inflation has these kind of ripple effects, right? So it's not just inflation, but were you waiting for interest rates to come down so you could buy a house? That's not going to happen this year. If you want to invest in government debt, now is a great time to do that and get very high yield. But, the stock markets are all over the map. The price of everything is impacted by all this. So it's really a systemic problem that has waves to it. And when you look at the polling now, you're seeing like about a third of Americans say this is their top concern. And the trend lines are the problem because you're seeing a majority of Americans now saying they think this problem is getting worse, not better. So for the president to convince voters of what it seemed like he was trying to do yesterday, like this is a short-term problem, it's going to come down fast. Americans don't believe that right now. So for them to believe that, he either needs to adjust his messaging where they need to see the numbers come around.
Well, and believing those in power that will actually do something about this issue is a whole separate thing, and it will be tested at the ballot box in November. And John, kind of in this dynamic, Speaker Johnson says the president's comments were taken out of context and that Trump is actually laser focused on lowering costs. How much will that resonate on the campaign trail? And even though Trump isn't officially on the ballot, we've still seen his influence, at least in the primaries to this point.
Oh, yeah. Trump is the issue of the election. I mean, he is the biggest issue. His conduct of the Iran war, his handling the economy, his conduct in office. I got to tell you, I was on the Hill yesterday when he made those comments, and they went through the Capitol pretty quickly. And it was just, every Republican just winced. They're upset. The messaging they're hearing out of the White House is not about inflation. It's not about the economy. It's not about Americans' financial status. They're overdue credit card payments. They're struggling to pay for school. And every day that Trump is out talking about Iran, he's talking about other issues, he's talking about the 2020 elections, is a disaster for the Hill Republicans. It's a big problem for them. Speaker Mike Johnson can talk, say Trump's labors are focused on inflation, but the American public doesn't think so. Congress doesn't think so. Even the Republicans in Congress, I'll tell you that. So this is a big problem for them.
And, kind of along those lines, if inflation does remain elevated and energy prices stay high, which at least the latter, it appears that it will, at least through the November election because of Iran, how much pressure does that actually put on the White House to make those adjustments? Again, if President Trump isn't officially on the ballot, even though those under the party that he is leading will very much be.
Yeah, it's a tremendous pressure point, and I think that's why you see the current tactic. To Jane Harmon's earlier point, not sure if it's going to work, but the stepped up pressure with bombing. The president clearly wants to bring this to a conclusion and move on. But once you get into something like this, you can't just like wave a magic wand and get out of it. So the president's facing enormous amount of pressure because, of course, if his party lose control of either chamber, but particularly both chambers, it will not only end his agenda, but create an era of investigations for the second half of his presidency. So there's a lot of reason for him to want to move on from this. The question is just, can he do it, and when will he do it?
I want to talk about it with CNN Business senior reporter David Goldman, who's with me now. So it seemed like he said he loved it because maybe it would then come down. That seemed to be where he was going with it. But what do you make of all this?
Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, This is certainly more foot and mouth disease. We've seen this from him saying that he doesn't care about Americans' finances. But is there really anything to love about inflation? I don't love it. I'm sure you don't love it. But let's take a look and see what actually happened. Now, we had gas prices rise 7% over the course of May.
Wow.
But that made 60% of the total gain that we saw in inflation. And so that, if you think about it, is actually not a bad thing, because we know why gas prices are rising. That's because of the war in Iran, because the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And this means we're not seeing those prices make their way through the economy yet. That's not a bad thing. And so I don't think that they're gonna fall like a rock for a lot of reasons. But it also means that lots of prices have nothing to do with Iran. That is a good thing. We've also seen that oil prices are down 15% from their peaks in May, and gas prices have fallen for 21 straight days. Now, we're still above $4 nationally. It's not, no one loves what they're seeing at the pump, but this is good news as well. And it means that in the next inflation report, instead of the 4.2% gains that we saw, maybe we'll see 4.5, something like that. It's not going to surge the way that it has in the last couple months. One more good piece of news. This number, 2.9%, if you strip out volatile prices like food and energy. That's what the Fed does, because they don't know how to, calculate for these really volatile prices. That is a number that the economy can deal with. It was only up 0.2% for the month. So is there something to love in the report? Maybe, but do we love inflation? No, and those numbers need to start coming down if Americans want to feel better about their finances, which certainly they are not right now.
Yeah, it's a big threshold. And even digging into some of the numbers and categories, it's important to know the context, of course. But yeah, as you point out, at the end of the day, inflation's inflation, and it hurts.
That's right.
All around. David Goldman, appreciate you being here. I want to bring in Republican Congressman Marlin Stutzman of Indiana to talk a little bit about this, because some of your colleagues on the Senate side were asked about this, Senators Hawley, Tuberville, Capito, and look, unsurprisingly, they are uncomfortable with the level of inflation, need to find a way to get the price of things down. And one, do you agree with your Republican colleagues? Where do you stand on this?
Good morning. Great to be with you this morning. Yeah, anytime inflation bumps up to those levels, it's concerning. I think that the jobs number that we had last week obviously is very strong. So the economy is strong, the fundamentals are strong, but of course the conflict in Iran is causing gas prices to be up, and that's probably the biggest driver of the inflation numbers. So we'll continue to watch it. I know President Trump is working very hard to find a solution here. But anytime those types of numbers come out, there's obviously more concern, but we'll get there. I'm convinced of that.
Well, and you mentioned the jobs numbers. Yes, they beat expectations over the last few months. But then, on the other hand, consumer sentiment is low. People are still paying more for items. So even if people say, all right, hey, the economy is working well overall, people aren't quite feeling it. It doesn't seem like in their wallets. And I think the question here sort of moving forward is, if inflation remains elevated and energy prices stay high because of the Iran conflict, look, I think everyone hopes it's resolved in a way that's satisfactory for everyone as quickly as possible, but we haven't quite seen that to this point. How much pressure does that put on the White House to make adjustments before November? I mean, President Trump isn't on the ballot directly, but you are, for example. What are you hearing from your constituents?
Right. Yeah, you know, I hear mixed reviews from my constituents. You know, older constituents tend to say, hey, you have to finish the job with Iran. The IRGC has been a problem for 40 years. They continue to be the greatest sponsor of terrorism around the world. Most nations accept that fact. Younger people are more frustrated with it. But at the same time, I think that that's why you have to focus on doing the right thing, even when times get tough. And President Trump is doing that. And the fact is that the IRGC is imploding. They are, you know, not coming to the table for a deal, and it's only going to cost them more in the end. They think they may get a short-term win, but President Trump is going to hang in there. I'm going to support him to remove the IRGC. I want to see the Iranian people have their country back, and I think that brings long-term stability in the Middle East and long-term lower prices, energy prices for us as Americans.